Have you ever watched your best ideas fade unnoticed in meetings, while competitors with less impactful solutions consistently win the opportunities you know should be yours? It's not your imagination, and it's certainly not a lack of merit in your thinking. Instead, it's the critical difference in your ability to ethically persuade others and turn attention into action. In today's world, attention is scarce, skepticism is high, and raw facts alone rarely win arguments or deals. What matters is your ability to communicate your ideas in ways that resonate, captivate, and compel. This isn't about manipulation, far from it. Genuine persuasion is rooted in clarity, credibility, and an understanding of human decision-making. The Science of Persuasion, How to Influence Anyone, is your comprehensive guide to mastering this essential skill. Through a structured, evidence-based approach, you'll learn a powerful 7-step formula that top leaders, negotiators, and communicators use to effortlessly and ethically guide others toward decisive action. From priming attention and powerfully framing facts to generating trust and commitment, each chapter distills persuasion down to principles and techniques you can apply immediately. By the time you've turned the final page, you'll know exactly how to influence decisions and inspire action without ever feeling manipulative. Your ideas deserve to be heard and acted upon. This book equips you with the tools to ensure they are. Chapter 1: Why Persuade? Your best ideas die in committee rooms. Your strongest proposals vanish into "we'll circle back" purgatory. Meanwhile, competitors with weaker offerings somehow win the deals, secure the partnerships, and capture the market share that should be yours. This isn't about having inferior products or services. It's about a fundamental gap in how you present, position, and move people toward decisions. While you're perfecting features and polishing presentations, others are mastering the science of influence, and they're eating your lunch. Welcome to the leverage skill that separates winners from wishful thinkers. Ethical persuasion. This chapter reveals why persuasion isn't manipulation, but strategic communication grounded in decision science. You'll discover the 7-step system that transforms attention into action, and why mastering this skill determines whether you scale with calm confidence or burn out chasing endless follow-ups. The attention war you're losing. Every message you send competes with 50 others. Every meeting you schedule fights against mental overload, notification fatigue, and the human tendency to defer decisions. Your stakeholders, whether prospects, partners, or team members, arrive to conversations with scattered attention and risk-averse instincts. Raw facts don't persuade, they confuse. A brilliant strategy presented poorly gets shelved. A mediocre idea framed powerfully gets funded. The difference isn't the quality of your thinking, it's your ability to make that thinking feel urgent, obvious, and safe to act on. Consider this. When was the last time a meeting ended with clear decisions and committed next steps? When did a prospect say yes in the room instead of asking for more information? When did your team align quickly on priorities without endless back and forth? If these scenarios feel rare, you're experiencing the cost of weak persuasion. You work harder, talk longer, and still hear "let me think about it." Meetings become information dumps instead of decision engines. Prospects disappear into evaluation paralysis. Teams nod in agreement but execute in chaos. Meanwhile, your competitors aren't necessarily smarter. They're more strategic. They set the narrative before you speak. They anchor expectations in their favor. They design choices that make yes feel inevitable. They understand that perception shapes reality, and they architect that perception deliberately. The compound effect of persuasive mastery. Master persuasion, and everything accelerates. Stakeholders begin pre-agreeing to your criteria before you even present solutions. Approvals happen in the room, not 6 emails later. You command premium pricing because you've anchored value early and often. Opportunities start flowing to you instead of requiring endless outreach. Partners invite you to collaborate because your vision is clear and compelling. Referrals multiply because your story is memorable and repeatable. Top talent aligns with your mission and stays committed because they understand exactly where you're heading and why it matters. Your calendar transforms from reactive chaos to strategic calm. Shorter calls leave more time for high-leverage thinking. Predictable pipelines replace feast or famine cycles. Clear delegation becomes possible because you can craft persuasive briefs that move people without your constant presence. This isn't about becoming a smooth-talking manipulator. It's about becoming a clear-thinking communicator who respects autonomy while designing outcomes. The best persuaders don't coerce, they clarify. They don't pressure, they prime. They don't overwhelm with options. They architect choices that make the right decision obvious. The price of persuasion: poverty. Ignore this skill, and competitors will define value for your entire market. Your genuine strengths will look like weaknesses when viewed through their carefully constructed frames. You'll get price-anchored low and struggle to escape the discount trap. Your category position will erode as others claim the high ground. Deals will stall and die quietly. Circling back becomes your full-time job instead of a rare exception. Projects miss critical windows of opportunity because decision-makers can't align on next steps. Burnout replaces momentum as you work harder for diminishing returns. Team confidence begins to slip. People hedge their commitments instead of making decisive moves. Execution splinters across competing priorities because the vision isn't compelling enough to create focus. Culture starts tolerating mediocrity because excellence requires the kind of clarity and commitment that only persuasive leadership can generate. The gap between your potential and your results widens. You know you're capable of more, but you can't seem to translate that capability into consistent wins. The problem isn't your expertise, it's your influence. Your first persuasion victory. By the end of this book, you'll run a complete persuasive sequence from attention to action. You'll diagnose whether your audience wants quick cues or detailed analysis, then match your message accordingly. You'll prime their attention with one powerful question that makes your solution feel immediately relevant. You'll frame your offer using before and after metrics that make value tangible. You'll create momentum through micro-commitments that build toward bigger decisions. You'll present choices in 3 clear tiers with a recommended default that guides selection without removing autonomy. Most importantly, you'll replace vague follow-ups with explicit next steps. Your proposal acceptance rates will climb. Your discounting pressure will drop because you've anchored value early and often. Time to yes will compress as friction disappears from your process. The 7-step influence engine. This system follows a precise sequence because attention precedes meaning, meaning precedes commitment, and commitment precedes choice. Skip steps, and you waste your best insights on unprimed minds. Route control ensures your audience processes information the way they prefer. Quick cues for busy executives, detailed analysis for technical stakeholders. Prime attention makes your key idea salient before content arrives. Power framing gives facts meaning through gain-loss lenses, anchors, and contrasts. Social gravity leverages proof, identity, and prestige to make agreement feel normal and safe. Sticky commitments converts interest into momentum through value-first reciprocity and micro-yes sequences. Message alchemy crafts narratives that feel true and stick in memory. Choice design makes the right decision the easy decision through defaults, clear tiers, and honest comparisons. Each step removes friction, from confusion to clarity, from doubt to proof, from paralysis to obvious action. The sequence matters because each element builds on the previous one. Frames without attention fall flat. Social proof without frames lacks context. Commitments without proof feel risky. Choices without commitments create delay. Winners versus losers in the influence game. Winners design outcomes, losers hope for them. Winners test different frames to see what resonates. Losers just talk longer and louder. Winners ask for micro-commitments that build momentum. Losers wait for miraculous conversions that rarely come. Winners respect autonomy while guiding decisions. They disclose real constraints instead of manufacturing fake scarcity. They give value first, then ask for commitment. They earn prestige through service, not swagger. Winners simplify ruthlessly. Clear language, clean visuals, crisp asks. One decision per interaction. They always know the next best step and make it obvious to everyone involved. Losers complicate everything. They bury insights in jargon. They present 17 options and wonder why people postpone. They mistake volume for value and complexity for credibility. The choice is yours. You can keep hoping your good ideas will eventually win on merit alone. Or you can learn to present those ideas in ways that feel urgent, obvious, and safe to act on. The next chapter, Route Control, reveals how to diagnose your audience's processing preferences in under 60 seconds, and why matching their mental pathway determines whether your message lands or gets lost in the noise. The science of influence awaits, and your first breakthrough is closer than you think. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Route Control. The CFO leans back in her chair, arms crossed, checking her phone. You're 3 slides into your presentation when she interrupts. Can you just tell me the bottom line? I have another meeting in 5 minutes. Meanwhile, the head of engineering sits forward, pen ready. Before we go further, I need to understand your methodology. What's your sample size? How did you control for variables? Can you walk me through the statistical significance? Same room, same proposal. 2 completely different brains processing your message in fundamentally incompatible ways. One wants the shortcut, the other demands the scenic route. Get this wrong, and your best ideas die before they're born. This is route control, the hidden skill that determines whether your message lands with impact or gets lost in translation. Most people think persuasion is about having the right words. The truth is more subtle. It's about matching your delivery to how your audience naturally processes information. The 2 highways of human decision-making. Your brain operates like a dual highway system. When you encounter new information, you unconsciously choose one of 2 processing routes. The first highway is fast, efficient, and relies on mental shortcuts. The second is slower, more deliberate, and demands careful analysis. Scientists call these the peripheral and central routes of persuasion. Think of peripheral processing as your brain's express lane. Quick cues, trusted sources, and gut instincts guide decisions. Central processing is the local road. Every claim gets scrutinized, every assumption gets tested, every implication gets explored. The route your audience takes isn't random. It depends on 2 critical factors: motivation and ability. High motivation plus high ability equals central processing. Low motivation or low ability defaults to peripheral processing. Miss this diagnosis, and you're speaking a foreign language to people who can't translate. Consider what happens when routes get mismatched. You deliver a data-heavy presentation to time-pressed executives who just want to know if this solves their problem and who else has used it successfully. They tune out, check phones, and ask for a summary deck they'll never read. You've triggered avoidance by overloading their express lane brains with local road detail. Flip the scenario. You give a high-level overview to technical stakeholders who need to understand exactly how your solution works before they'll recommend it. They lean back, exchange skeptical glances, and pepper you with questions you can't answer. You've triggered suspicion by offering shortcuts to people who demand the scenic route. The diagnostic moment. Route control starts with a single qualifying question that reveals everything you need to know. What would help you decide today? Listen carefully to their response. Time-pressed decision-makers say things like, "I need to know this works and won't blow up our budget." They want credible shortcuts, social proof, authority cues, and clear next steps. They're signaling peripheral route preference. Analytical stakeholders respond differently. "I need to understand your approach, see the data, and evaluate alternatives." They want evidence chains, methodology details, and comparative analysis. They're demanding central route processing. Watch their body language and energy levels. Peripheral processors check phones, glance at clocks, and speak in shorthand. Central processors take notes, ask follow-up questions, and use technical language. Peripheral processors want to get to yes or no quickly. Central processors want to get to right or wrong thoroughly. The stakes matter too. Low-risk decisions default to peripheral processing, even among analytical people. High-stakes choices trigger central processing, even among intuitive decision-makers. A $500 software purchase might get peripheral treatment. A $50,000 platform migration demands central analysis. The art of message calibration. Once you've diagnosed the route, calibrate your message load accordingly. Central route audiences need 3 types of proof: numbers that quantify impact, methods that explain how you achieve results, and cases that demonstrate real-world application. They want to see your reasoning chain and evaluate your logic. Peripheral route audiences need different fuel: ethos cues that establish credibility, social proof that reduces risk, and single benefits that clarify value. They want to trust your expertise and follow proven paths rather than analyze every detail. The key insight: you can always switch routes mid-conversation. Start peripheral with busy executives, establish credibility, and show social proof. If they lean in and start asking technical questions, pivot to central processing. Give them the methodology and data they're suddenly craving. Start central with analytical stakeholders. Show your numbers and explain your methods. If they seem satisfied with your rigor and start asking about implementation timelines, shift to peripheral mode. Focus on next steps and proven processes rather than additional analysis. The inoculation advantage. Here's where most people get route control wrong. They think avoiding objections makes them more persuasive. The opposite is true. Acknowledging likely concerns up front, what researchers call inoculation, actually strengthens your position by reducing resistance later. The trick is doing this lightly and strategically. One line is usually enough. You might be wondering about security. We're SOC 2 compliant, and our enterprise clients include 3 Fortune 500 financial services firms. You've acknowledged the concern, provided a quick answer, and moved on. This works because people have persuasion knowledge. They know when someone is trying to influence them. Heavy-handed tactics trigger defensive reactions. Light inoculation feels helpful rather than manipulative. You're addressing their concerns before they become objections. For central route audiences, invite scrutiny where it builds trust. Feel free to dig into our methodology. We've published our approach and welcome technical review. For peripheral route audiences, borrow credibility from trusted sources. The team at McKinsey evaluated our approach and recommended it to their clients. The fluency factor. Processing fluency, how easy your message is to understand, affects both routes but in different ways. For peripheral processors, fluency signals trustworthiness. Clear language, clean visuals, and simple structure make your message feel more credible. For central processors, fluency reduces cognitive load so they can focus on evaluating your logic rather than decoding your presentation. Short sentences work better than long ones. One idea per slide beats cluttered layouts. White space helps more than decoration. Remove jargon unless your audience uses it naturally. Replace abstract concepts with concrete comparisons. Cut unnecessary words ruthlessly. Your goal isn't to sound smart, it's to be understood quickly and completely. The compound effect of route mastery. Get route control right, and everything else becomes easier. Meetings end with decisions instead of requests for more information. Stakeholders echo your criteria when evaluating alternatives. Proposal acceptance rates climb because you're speaking each audience's native language. You'll notice shorter sales cycles as friction disappears from your process. Less discounting pressure because you've matched value to processing preferences. Faster procurement cycles because technical and business stakeholders align on the same narrative. The best outcome? In-room approvals on key initiatives. Executives sign off with conditions clearly captured. Cross-functional teams align in single sessions rather than endless follow-ups. Public commitments get recorded and honored. When route control fails, 3 failure modes kill route control. First, information overload. You bury peripheral processors in details they don't want or need. The fix is surgical. Move technical information to appendices, focus on 3 key points maximum, and pause regularly to ask what's missing. Second, tactic detection. Your audience senses manipulation and raises defenses. The antidote is transparency. Disclose your reasoning, acknowledge trade-offs honestly, and invite counterexamples. Drop the hype and let your logic speak. Third, underproofing. You give central processors shortcuts when they need evidence. Add credible numbers, reference independent benchmarks, and offer small reversible pilots that let them test your claims safely. The most successful persuaders become route chameleons. They adapt their delivery to match their audience's processing preferences while maintaining their core message integrity. They read the room in seconds, calibrate their approach accordingly, and switch routes fluidly as conversations evolve. Master route control, and you'll never again wonder why your brilliant ideas get ignored or why weaker proposals somehow win. You'll speak the language your audience's brain wants to hear, in the format it's designed to process. But route control is just the beginning. Even the most perfectly calibrated message fails if it arrives to an unprimed mind. The next chapter reveals how to engineer attention itself, making your key idea impossible to ignore before you've spoken a single word about your solution. Chapter 3. Prime attention. The meeting starts in 30 seconds. You've rehearsed your pitch, polished your slides, and prepared for every possible question. But there's one thing you haven't considered: what your audience is thinking about right now. The VP of Sales just finished a brutal quarterly review. The CTO is mentally debugging a production issue. The CFO is calculating budget variances from this morning's report. Each person carries a different mental context into your presentation, and that context will determine how they interpret every word you say. Most presenters ignore this reality. They launch straight into their agenda, assuming everyone's brain is a blank slate ready to receive their message. But attention doesn't work that way. The mind is never neutral. It's always focused on something, and whatever captures that focus first becomes the lens through which everything else gets filtered. This is the hidden power of priming, the ability to engineer what people think about before you tell them what to think. Master this skill, and your ideas land with precision instead of getting lost in mental noise. The invisible force that shapes everything. Your brain is a pattern-matching machine that interprets new information through the lens of what's already active in your mind. Show someone the word doctor, and they'll recognize nurse faster than bread. Ask them to think about security, and they'll notice risks more readily than opportunities. Prime them with thoughts of collaboration, and they'll interpret your proposal as partnership rather than vendor pitch. This isn't manipulation, it's how human cognition works. The first frame often becomes the default frame. Early impressions don't just influence later judgments, they create the mental categories that make those judgments possible. Consider what happens when priming goes wrong. You walk into a cost-cutting meeting and immediately start talking about growth opportunities. Your audience hears expensive, even when you say investment. You present to time-pressed executives and open with your company history. They hear, this will take forever, even when you promise quick wins. The same facts interpreted through different primes create completely different meanings. A 15% improvement sounds modest when people are thinking about transformation, but impressive when they're focused on optimization. A 6-month timeline feels fast when they're considering strategic initiatives, but slow when they're solving urgent problems. Smart persuaders don't fight this reality, they engineer it. They understand that the battle for attention happens before the first slide appears. They know that what people notice first determines what they'll remember last. The gateway principle. Attention is the gateway to persuasion. No attention means no message processing. Scattered attention means scattered interpretation. But focused attention, attention deliberately directed toward your key idea, creates the mental conditions where influence becomes possible. The challenge is that attention in business settings is under constant assault. Phones buzz with notifications. Laptops display urgent emails. minds wander to pressing deadlines and unresolved conflicts. Your message competes with a dozen other mental priorities, most of which feel more immediate than whatever you're about to propose. This is why great content often fails. Without proper priming, even brilliant insights get filtered through irrelevant mental contexts. Your breakthrough strategy gets evaluated as just another vendor pitch. Your cost-saving solution gets dismissed as probably too complicated. Your efficiency improvement gets ignored because everyone's thinking about compliance issues. Priming solves this by making your key idea the most salient thing in the room before you start explaining it. Instead of competing with mental noise, you become the signal that cuts through it. The art of strategic openings. Effective priming starts with a single, carefully crafted question that sets the mental stage for everything that follows. Not just any question, a question that makes your solution feel immediately relevant to their current concerns. What would make this a no-brainer for you today? This question primes them to think about decision criteria rather than obstacles. It shifts focus from why this might not work to what would make this obviously right. It invites them to articulate the conditions under which they'd say yes, giving you a roadmap for the rest of your presentation. What are your must-not-haves in any solution? This frames the conversation around avoiding problems rather than achieving gains. Perfect when your audience is risk-averse or dealing with recent failures. It helps you position your offering as the safe choice rather than the ambitious one. If we could solve just one thing today, what would have the biggest impact on your team? This question narrows focus to a single, high-value outcome. It prevents scope creep and analysis paralysis by establishing clear priorities up front. The key is matching your opening question to your audience's current mental state and decision-making context. Time-pressed executives need different primes than analytical stakeholders. Cost-conscious buyers need different frames than growth-focused leaders. The Identity Activation Code. Beyond opening questions, you can prime attention by activating specific aspects of your audience's professional identity. People don't just have roles, they have values, priorities, and self-concepts tied to those roles. Activate the right identity elements, and they'll interpret your message through that lens. As operators who optimize cash flow, this phrase primes them to think like efficiency experts rather than strategic visionaries. They'll evaluate your proposal based on immediate financial impact rather than long-term potential. Perfect when you're selling cost reduction or process improvement. As a talent-first leader who values retention, this activates their identity as someone who cares about people and culture. They'll interpret your solution through the lens of employee satisfaction and team dynamics rather than pure productivity metrics. As a precision-driven analyst who cares about data quality, this primes them to focus on accuracy, methodology, and evidence rather than speed or convenience. They'll want to see your numbers and understand your approach before considering outcomes. The magic happens when identity primes align with your solution's strengths. If your competitive advantage is reliability, prime them to think like risk managers. If your edge is innovation, activate their identity as forward-thinking leaders. If your strength is simplicity, prime them to value efficiency over complexity. The sequence that builds momentum. Once you've primed attention and activated relevant identities, you need to sequence your narrative in a way that maintains focus and builds toward action. The most effective sequence follows a simple pattern: stakes, proof, path, ask. Stakes establish why this matters now. Not generic importance, but specific relevance to their current situation. Your customer acquisition cost has increased 23% this quarter, while your competitors are reducing theirs. This creates urgency without manufacturing false scarcity. Proof demonstrates that change is possible. One striking before and after metric works better than a dozen moderate improvements. Company X reduced their CAC by 31% in 8 weeks using this approach. This shifts the conversation from whether to how. Path shows the route from current state to desired outcome in 3 clear steps. Not a detailed project plan, but a simple progression that feels achievable. First, we audit your current funnel. Then we implement 3 specific optimizations. Finally, we measure and refine based on results. Ask requests a specific, low-risk next step that moves toward commitment. Would it make sense to run a quick audit on your top 3 channels? This creates momentum without triggering resistance. The sequence works because each element builds on the previous one. Stakes create relevance, proof creates possibility, path creates confidence, ask creates action. The power of open loops. One of the most powerful priming techniques involves opening mental loops that your audience wants to see closed. When you promise information but delay delivery, you create what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, an unconscious drive to complete unfinished business. I'm going to show you the single change that increased conversion rates by 40%. But first, let me give you some context. You've opened a loop. Their brain now wants to know what that change was, creating sustained attention throughout your setup. There's one mistake that 90% of companies make with their data strategy, and I'll reveal it in a few minutes. Another loop. They're now primed to listen for that mistake, filtering everything you say through the question, is this the big mistake? By the end of this meeting, you'll know exactly why your current approach isn't scaling and what to do about it. This creates anticipation for both problem diagnosis and solution revelation. The key is closing these loops at strategic moments. Open the loop early to capture attention. Build context and credibility in the middle. Close the loop just before your ask to maximize impact. Environmental engineering. Priming isn't just about words, it's about context. The physical and digital environment shapes attention as powerfully as any opening question. Smart persuaders control these environmental factors to support their message. Remove competing stimuli before you start. Ask people to close laptops or put phones on silent. This isn't about being controlling, it's about creating conditions where your message can be heard clearly. Let's give this our full attention for the next 20 minutes is a reasonable request that most people will honor. Control what's visible at a glance. If you're presenting virtually, ask people to turn on cameras. If you're in person, arrange seating so everyone can see each other and your visuals clearly. Eliminate distracting decorations or irrelevant information from slides. Set clear expectations upfront about time, agenda, and desired outcomes. We'll cover 3 key points in 15 minutes and end with a specific next step, gives people a mental framework for processing your message efficiently. When priming backfires, 3 common mistakes kill effective priming. First, fear without efficacy. You prime them to think about problems without providing clear, achievable solutions. This creates anxiety rather than motivation. The fix is pairing every risk with a specific, doable mitigation step. Second, competing salience. Multiple messages fight for attention simultaneously. This happens when agendas are packed, rooms are chaotic, or your opening tries to cover too many topics. The solution is ruthless focus. One key idea, one clear frame, one specific ask. Third, identity misfire. You activate the wrong aspect of their professional identity for your particular message. A growth-focused prime backfires when they're in cost-cutting mode. A risk-focused prime fails when they're feeling aggressive about expansion. The fix is reading the room and adjusting your identity activation accordingly. The compound effect of attention mastery. Get priming right, and everything else becomes easier. Stakeholders track the same problem instead of pursuing different priorities. Fewer tangents and derailments interrupt your flow. One clarifying question replaces 5 confused ones because everyone's operating from the same mental framework. At the excellent level, audiences start requesting next steps before you ask for them. Can we see a pilot? Appears unprompted because you've primed them to think about implementation rather than evaluation. Calendar invites get sent in room because the path forward feels obvious. At the best level, your frame becomes their frame. Your metric becomes their success metric. Your timeline becomes their project timeline. Your language becomes their team's shorthand for discussing the initiative. This isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. You're helping people focus on what matters most instead of getting distracted by what matters least. You're creating mental conditions where good decisions become easier to make and easier to defend. Master the art of priming attention, and you'll never again wonder why your brilliant ideas get overlooked or why weaker proposals somehow capture mindshare. You'll engineer focus itself, making your key insights impossible to ignore. But even perfectly primed attention can be wasted if your message lacks the right frame. The next chapter reveals how the same facts can be transformed into completely different meanings, and why the frame you choose determines whether people see opportunity or threat, gain or loss, urgent priority or distant possibility. Chapter 4. Power Framing. Two executives sit in identical meetings, reviewing the same proposal with the same numbers. The first hears, "This investment will increase your revenue by 15% over 12 months. The second hears, "Without this, you'll lose $2.3 million in potential revenue this year while your competitors gain market share." Same facts, same outcome, completely different decisions. The first executive schedules a follow-up meeting to explore options. The second approves the budget on the spot. What made the difference wasn't the data, it was the frame. One presentation positioned the proposal as a nice-to-have growth opportunity. The other positioned it as a must-have defense against competitive threat. This is the hidden power that shapes every business decision, not what the facts are, but what the facts mean. Raw data doesn't persuade anyone. Meaning persuades, and meaning comes from the frame you choose to wrap around those facts. Most people think framing is about spin or manipulation. They're wrong. Framing is about clarity, helping people see the true significance of information by providing the right context for interpretation. Master this skill, and you'll never again wonder why your strongest proposals get shelved while weaker alternatives somehow win approval. The lens that changes everything. Your brain doesn't process information in isolation. Every fact gets interpreted through a mental framework that determines its significance. Change the frame, and you change the meaning, even when the underlying reality stays exactly the same. Consider a simple example, a software upgrade that costs $50,000 and saves 2 hours per week for a 10-person team. Frame this as efficiency improvement, and it sounds like a nice optimization. Frame it as productivity investment, and it feels more strategic. Frame it as competitive necessity, and it becomes urgent. But here's where framing gets really powerful. Frame it as the cost of standing still, and suddenly the conversation shifts entirely. Instead of justifying a $50,000 expense, you're highlighting a $156,000 annual opportunity cost. 20 hours per week times 50 weeks times an average loaded salary of $156 per hour. Same upgrade, same benefits, same costs, but now the frame makes inaction feel expensive and action feel obvious. You've transformed a discretionary purchase into a financial imperative. The most successful persuaders understand that people don't buy products or services, they buy meanings. They don't invest in features, they invest in outcomes. They don't approve budgets, they approve stories about what those budgets will accomplish. The psychology of value perception. Human beings are terrible at evaluating things in absolute terms. We're wired to judge everything relative to something else. This isn't a bug in our cognitive system. It's a feature that helped our ancestors survive by quickly assessing whether situations were better or worse than alternatives. This relativity principle creates enormous opportunities for ethical persuaders. By choosing the right reference point, you can make the same offer feel expensive or affordable, risky or safe, urgent or optional. The key is understanding what your audience naturally compares your proposal against, and then either reinforcing that comparison or shifting it to something more favorable. Most people anchor against the status quo, which makes any change feel risky and expensive. Smart framers anchor against the cost of inaction, which makes change feel safe and necessary. Instead of competing against doing nothing, you're competing against falling behind. The anchoring effect is so powerful that even random numbers influence subsequent judgments. Show someone a high number before discussing price, and they'll perceive your actual price as more reasonable. Show them a low number first, and the same price feels expensive. This isn't conscious calculation, it's automatic cognitive processing that happens below the level of awareness. The art of strategic anchoring. Effective framing starts with setting the right anchor, the reference point that shapes all subsequent value judgments. Most presenters anchor weakly or accidentally. They mention their price without context, leaving audiences to compare against whatever random reference point happens to be active in their minds. Strategic anchors are different. They're carefully chosen reference points that make your offer feel reasonable, necessary, or even inevitable. The best anchors come from three sources: status quo costs, premium benchmarks, or independent market data. Status quo anchoring reveals what inaction actually costs. Your current system requires 40 hours of manual processing each month. At a loaded cost of $75 per hour, that's $36,000 annually just in labor, before you factor in error rates and opportunity costs. Now your $25,000 solution feels like a bargain rather than an expense. Premium benchmarking positions your offer against high-end alternatives. Enterprise solutions in this category typically run $200,000 to $500,000. Our approach delivers 80% of the functionality at 20% of the cost. You've anchored against expensive alternatives, making your price feel reasonable by comparison. Independent market data provides third-party credibility for your anchor. According to Gartner, companies that don't modernize their data infrastructure lose an average of $2.1 million annually in competitive disadvantage. You're not making claims, you're citing authoritative sources that support your frame. The key is revisiting your anchor throughout the presentation, especially just before your ask. Don't set it once and forget it. Reinforce the reference point that makes your proposal feel obvious. The gain-loss decision engine. One of the most powerful framing choices involves whether to emphasize gains or losses. Research shows that people are roughly twice as motivated to avoid losses as they are to achieve equivalent gains. Lose $100, and it hurts more than winning $100 feels good. This loss aversion creates opportunities for reframing. Instead of promising a 15% revenue increase, highlight the competitive revenue they'll lose without improvement. Instead of touting efficiency gains, emphasize the waste they're currently tolerating. Instead of selling growth opportunities, frame the discussion around market share protection. But loss framing only works when paired with high efficacy, clear, achievable steps that reduce the threat. Fear without a clear path to safety creates paralysis, not action. The most effective approach combines loss awareness with gain confidence. Here's what you're losing by standing still, and here's the simple path to turn that around. Prevention-focused audiences respond better to loss frames. They're motivated by avoiding problems, reducing risks, and maintaining stability. Promotion-focused audiences prefer gain frames. They're energized by growth opportunities, competitive advantages, and breakthrough possibilities. The trick is reading your audience's current mindset and matching your frame accordingly. Cost-cutting environments favor prevention frames. Growth-oriented cultures prefer promotion frames. Crisis situations demand loss frames paired with clear efficacy. Expansion phases call for gain frames that paint compelling futures. The contrast that creates clarity. Effective framing doesn't just set anchors, it creates vivid contrasts that make choices feel obvious. The most powerful contrasts show before and after scenarios using a single decisive metric that matters to your audience. Today, your sales team spends 60% of their time on administrative tasks. With this system, that drops to 15%, giving you back 18 hours per week per rep to focus on actual selling. The contrast is stark, specific, and tied to outcomes they care about. Visual contrasts work even better than verbal ones. Side-by-side charts, before and after screenshots, and red to green progress meters make differences feel tangible rather than abstract. The goal is making the gap between current state and future state so obvious that bridging it feels inevitable. But avoid overwhelming audiences with too many contrasts. One powerful before and after comparison beats 5 moderate improvements. Focus on the metric that matters most to your specific audience. Cost for CFOs, efficiency for operations leaders, growth for sales executives, risk for compliance teams. The scarcity that motivates without manipulating. Real constraints create urgency. Fake constraints create reactance. The difference between ethical scarcity and manipulative pressure lies in transparency and autonomy. Ethical scarcity states real limitations honestly. We can only take on 3 new implementations this quarter due to capacity constraints. This creates urgency without deception. It respects the audience's intelligence while highlighting genuine time sensitivity. Manipulative scarcity manufactures false urgency. This offer expires at midnight when there's no real deadline. This triggers psychological reactance, the tendency to resist when we feel our freedom is being restricted artificially. The best approach is pairing real constraints with preserved autonomy. We have 2 implementation slots available in Q1, but if that doesn't work for your timeline, we can discuss Q2 options. You've created urgency while maintaining choice. In B2B contexts, avoid countdown timers, limited time offers, and other consumer-style pressure tactics. Instead, focus on business constraints that create natural urgency: budget cycles, project timelines, competitive pressures, or regulatory deadlines. When frames backfire, 3 common mistakes kill effective framing. First, reactance, making people feel boxed in or manipulated. This happens when frames feel too aggressive or when you don't preserve sufficient autonomy. The fix is offering multiple valid perspectives and inviting them to choose their preferred frame. Second, anchor disbelief, setting reference points that feel unrealistic or unsupported. This destroys credibility and makes your entire proposal feel suspect. The solution is showing your math, citing credible sources, and offering to test your assumptions through small pilots. Third, fear without efficacy, highlighting problems without providing clear, achievable solutions. This creates anxiety rather than motivation. The remedy is pairing every risk with specific mitigation steps and demonstrating early wins that build confidence. The compound effect of strategic framing. Get framing right, and prospects start repeating your language back to you. It's costing us $18,000 per quarter to wait becomes their internal justification for action. We need the growth option becomes their shorthand for your premium tier. This is a no-brainer if we start small, becomes their path to approval. At the excellent level, you'll see 15 to 30% lifts in target option selection as your frames guide choice architecture. The middle tier becomes the obvious default. Objections shift from "why should we do this" to "how fast can we start?" Procurement processes accelerate because the value case feels clear and compelling. At the best level, your frame becomes the market frame. Competitors get quoted against your reference points. Industry analysts echo your metrics. Your language becomes the standard way people discuss problems and solutions in your category. This isn't about manipulation. It's about clarity. You're helping people see the true significance of their situation and the real value of potential solutions. You're converting abstract benefits into concrete meanings that drive decisive action. Master the art of power framing, and you'll never again watch superior proposals lose to inferior alternatives. You'll shape perception itself, making your ideas feel not just logical, but inevitable. But even the most compelling frame falls flat if it arrives without social validation. The next chapter reveals how to harness the invisible force that shapes every business decision, the need to know that others like us have chosen this path and succeeded. Chapter 5: Social Gravity. The boardroom falls silent as the CEO asks the question that kills most proposals: who else is doing this? You've just delivered a flawless presentation. Your logic is airtight. Your numbers are compelling. Your solution addresses their exact pain points. But none of that matters now, because in this moment, your audience isn't evaluating your proposal. They're looking for social validation that choosing you won't make them look foolish. This is the invisible force that shapes every business decision: social gravity. Before people buy your product, they buy into the idea that others like them have made similar choices and succeeded. Before they trust your solution, they need to trust that their peers would approve of this decision. Most presenters treat social proof as an afterthought, a few logos on a slide or a testimonial quote in an appendix. They're missing the deeper truth. Humans are fundamentally social creatures who use the behavior of others as a compass for navigating uncertainty. Master this force, and your ideas enter rooms with momentum instead of resistance. The invisible influence network. Every professional decision happens within a web of social relationships and tribal identities that most people never consciously acknowledge. Your audience doesn't just evaluate your proposal in isolation. They mentally simulate how this choice will be perceived by colleagues, bosses, industry peers, and professional communities they aspire to join. This social calculation happens automatically and unconsciously. When a CTO considers a new technology platform, part of their brain is asking, what would other CTOs at companies like ours think about this choice? When a marketing director evaluates a campaign strategy, they're wondering, would this approach be respected by the marketing leaders I admire? The power of social gravity comes from its ability to shortcut complex evaluation processes. Instead of analyzing every detail of your proposal, people can ask a simpler question: do people like me choose solutions like this? If the answer is yes, your proposal feels safe. If the answer is no, or if they can't find an answer, your proposal feels risky, regardless of its actual merits. This isn't laziness or shallow thinking. It's efficient decision-making in a world of infinite options and limited time. Social proof serves as a quality filter that helps busy professionals focus their analytical energy on pre-validated solutions rather than exploring every possibility from scratch. The challenge is that most social proof is either irrelevant or invisible to your specific audience. A testimonial from a Fortune 500 company means nothing to a startup founder. A case study from a tech company doesn't resonate with manufacturing executives. Generic praise from unnamed sources triggers skepticism rather than confidence. The architecture of credible proof. Effective social proof requires three specific elements working together: hard numbers that quantify outcomes, recognizable names or peer segments that establish relevance, and brief narratives that show how success was achieved despite obstacles. The number provides concrete evidence that your solution delivers measurable results. Not vague improvements or directional gains, but specific metrics that matter to your audience. Reduced customer acquisition cost by 34% hits differently than improved marketing efficiency. The precision signals authenticity while the metric demonstrates value. The name or peer segment establishes tribal relevance. Your audience needs to see themselves reflected in your proof. If you're selling to mid-market SaaS companies, highlight results from other mid-market SaaS companies. If you're presenting to cost-conscious CFOs, feature examples from other cost-conscious CFOs. The goal is making your success stories feel like previews of their own potential success. The narrative provides the crucial context that makes proof feel real rather than cherry-picked. A 4-sentence story that covers the initial situation, the specific challenge they faced, the action they took, and the outcome they achieved creates believability that numbers and names alone cannot provide. Consider the difference between Company X increased revenue by 40% and this proof stack. TechCorp, a 200-person SaaS company, was struggling with 60% customer churn despite strong product-market fit. Their support team was overwhelmed, response times were climbing, and frustrated customers were leaving for competitors. After implementing our customer success platform, they reduced churn to 23% and increased expansion revenue by 40% within 6 months. Same outcome, but the second version feels credible because it acknowledges real challenges and shows a logical path from problem to solution. Your audience can envision themselves in that story. The tribal identity map. Before you can leverage social gravity, you need to understand the tribes your audience identifies with and aspires to join. These aren't just job titles or company sizes. They're value systems, professional identities, and aspirational groups that shape how people see themselves and want to be seen by others. A startup founder might identify with the move fast and break things tribe that values speed over perfection. A Fortune 500 executive might belong to the proven and scalable tribe that prioritizes risk management over innovation. A technical architect might align with the elegant and efficient tribe that values craftsmanship over convenience. These tribal identities determine which proof points resonate and which ones backfire. Show a startup founder case studies from slow-moving enterprises, and they'll worry your solution isn't agile enough. Show an enterprise executive examples from scrappy startups, and they'll question whether your approach can handle their complexity and compliance requirements. The key is mapping not just who your audience is, but who they want to become. The marketing manager at a mid-market company might aspire to work at a brand name enterprise someday. Show them how enterprise marketing leaders use your solution, and you're not just proving effectiveness, you're offering a path toward their professional aspirations. Values matter as much as roles. Some leaders prioritize innovation and competitive advantage. Others focus on reliability and risk mitigation. Some care most about team empowerment and culture. Others emphasize efficiency and cost control. Your proof needs to align with their core values, not just their functional responsibilities. The prestige paradox. There are two types of power in professional settings: dominance and prestige. Dominance comes from force, hierarchy, and control. Prestige comes from respect, expertise, and service. Most people trying to build influence focus on the wrong one. Dominance-based approaches try to impress through credentials, name-dropping, and aggressive confidence. We're the leading provider with over 500 enterprise clients and partnerships with every major consulting firm. This might work in some contexts, but it often triggers resistance because it feels like bragging rather than helping. Prestige-based approaches build influence through generous teaching, humble expertise, and genuine service. Instead of claiming to be the best, you demonstrate value by sharing insights, acknowledging limitations, and inviting scrutiny. Here's what we've learned from working with companies facing similar challenges, including some mistakes we made early on that might help you avoid similar pitfalls. The prestige approach works better for sustainable influence because it creates genuine respect rather than temporary compliance. People want to work with experts who make them smarter, not vendors who make them feel inferior. This means citing where you learned key insights, acknowledging when you don't know something, and welcoming questions that test your expertise. It means sharing frameworks and methodologies even when you're not sure the prospect will buy. It means positioning yourself as a guide rather than a guru. The proof placement strategy. Social proof isn't just about what you say, it's about when and where you say it. The most powerful placement is near the moment of decision, when uncertainty peaks and social validation matters most. This means putting your strongest proof points in proposal sidebars, email signatures, and slide footers rather than burying them in company overview sections. It means repeating the same key metric at multiple decision moments rather than spreading different numbers throughout your presentation. It means ending your pitch with "ready to match what your peers chose," rather than "do you have any questions?" The goal is making social validation feel immediate and relevant rather than historical and abstract. Your audience should feel like they're joining a movement of smart people making smart choices, not considering an isolated vendor transaction. This also means refreshing your proof regularly. 6-month-old case studies feel stale. Last quarter's results feel current. This week's success story feels like momentum. The recency of your proof signals that your solution is actively working for people right now, not just theoretically validated by past results. When social proof backfires, 3 common mistakes kill the power of social gravity. First, off-tribe proof that makes your audience feel like outsiders rather than insiders. A manufacturing company doesn't care how well your solution works for software companies. unless you can clearly explain why the results transfer to their context. Second, vague or unverifiable authority that triggers skepticism rather than confidence. Leading companies choose us means nothing. 3 of the top 5 companies in your industry use our platform to manage supply chain risk means everything. Specificity signals authenticity. Third, proof overload that creates fatigue rather than confidence. 17 logos on a slide don't impress, they overwhelm. 5 detailed case studies don't convince, they confuse. 1 perfect proof point beats 10 mediocre ones every time. The fix for off-tribe proof is translation. Show how results from adjacent industries apply to their specific context. The fix for vague authority is specificity and verification. The fix for proof overload is curation and focus. The compound effect of social gravity. Get social proof right, and you'll see immediate improvements in response rates and meeting acceptance. People return calls faster when they recognize peer companies in your email signature. They take meetings more readily when warm introductions mention mutual connections. They listen more carefully when you reference familiar names and relevant examples. At the excellent level, stakeholders start quoting your examples in their own presentations. Company X did this and got these results. Maybe we should consider it too. Your proof becomes their internal selling tool, spreading your message through their organization without your direct involvement. At the best level, your brand becomes the default choice in your category. Industry language starts mirroring your messaging. Competitors get evaluated against your benchmarks. Word of mouth creates inbound demand because people want to join the community of smart companies that work with you. This isn't about manipulation or manufactured consensus. It's about making genuine success visible and relevant to people who could benefit from similar outcomes. You're not creating fake social proof. You're amplifying real social proof that already exists but might not be visible to your specific audience. Master the art of social gravity, and your ideas will enter every room with momentum. People will lean in rather than lean back. They'll look for reasons to say yes rather than reasons to say no. They'll see choosing you as joining a community of smart decision-makers rather than taking a risky bet on an unknown vendor. But even the strongest social proof can't overcome weak commitment. The next chapter reveals how to transform interested observers into active participants, and why the path from sounds good to let's do this requires a completely different set of skills. Chapter 6, Sticky Commitments. The meeting ends with handshakes and smiles. This looks really promising, the VP says. Let's circle back next week to discuss next steps. You walk away feeling confident until next week becomes next month, and promising becomes, we've decided to table this for now. Sound familiar? You've just experienced the gap between interest and action, the place where most deals go to die. Your presentation was flawless. Your solution was perfect. Your audience was engaged. But engagement without commitment is just expensive entertainment. This is the hidden challenge that separates successful persuaders from frustrated presenters, turning conversations into commitments. Interest fades, enthusiasm wanes, competing priorities emerge. But commitments, real commitments, create momentum that carries deals forward even when initial excitement cools. The secret isn't asking for bigger commitments. It's understanding how small commitments create the psychological conditions that make bigger commitments feel inevitable. Master this progression, and you'll never again wonder why your best prospects disappear into "we're still evaluating" purgatory. The psychology of progressive commitment. Human beings have a deep psychological need for consistency. Once we take a position or make a commitment, especially a public one, we feel internal pressure to align our future actions with that initial choice. This isn't conscious calculation. It's automatic mental processing that helps us maintain a coherent sense of identity. This consistency drive creates enormous opportunities for ethical persuaders. When someone agrees to a small, voluntary action, they're more likely to agree to related larger actions later. Not because the larger action has become more appealing, but because saying no would create uncomfortable psychological tension with their previous yes. The key word is voluntary. Forced compliance creates reactance, the tendency to resist when we feel our freedom is being restricted. But freely chosen commitments create ownership. The person doesn't feel manipulated, they feel invested. They're not following your agenda, they're pursuing their own stated priorities. This is why the most effective persuaders never ask for the big commitment first. They design a sequence of increasingly significant commitments that feel natural and logical. Each yes makes the next yes easier, not through pressure, but through consistency. The progression works because each commitment changes how people see themselves. Someone who agrees to explore options starts thinking of themselves as someone who's actively evaluating solutions. Someone who agrees to run a pilot starts thinking of themselves as someone who's testing new approaches. Someone who agrees to implement gradually starts thinking of themselves as someone who's committed to change. The architecture of reciprocal value. Before you can ask for any commitment, you need to create a sense of obligation through genuine value delivery. But this isn't about quid pro quo transactions. It's about establishing a relationship where helping each other feels natural and expected. The most powerful approach is giving something valuable before asking for anything in return. Not a generic white paper or standard demo, but something specifically tailored to their situation that required real effort on your part. A quick audit of their current approach. A customized analysis of their data. A brief video explaining how to solve their most pressing challenge. The effort matters more than the size of the gift. A 5-minute personalized video feels more valuable than a 50-page generic report because it demonstrates that you've invested time thinking specifically about their situation. It shows respect for their unique circumstances rather than treating them as another prospect in your pipeline. The timing matters too. Give value early in the relationship before trust is fully established. This demonstrates good faith and separates you from vendors who only provide value after contracts are signed. It also creates what psychologists call the reciprocity rule, the almost universal human tendency to want to return favors. But avoid transactional language that makes the exchange feel calculated. Don't say, "I'm sending this so you'll take a meeting with me." Instead say, "I noticed you're dealing with X challenge. Here's a quick analysis that might help, regardless of whether we end up working together." The gift feels genuine because it is genuine. You're helping them succeed, not just trying to advance your sale. The staircase strategy. Effective commitment building follows a careful progression from low-risk to high-stakes decisions. Think of it as a staircase where each step is slightly higher than the last, but never so high that it feels like a dangerous leap. The first step might be agreeing to a brief conversation. Worth exploring this for 10 minutes? This feels safe because the time investment is minimal and the commitment is reversible. They can always end the conversation early if it's not valuable. The second step might be agreeing to involve another stakeholder. Should we loop in your operations director for 5 minutes to get their perspective? This feels logical because you're asking them to include someone whose input would be valuable. It also creates a small public commitment. They've now told a colleague that this conversation is worth having. The third step might be agreeing to evaluation criteria. What would need to be true for this to be a no-brainer decision? This feels helpful because you're asking them to clarify their own decision-making process. It also creates commitment to specific standards that you can address in your proposal. Each step builds on the previous one while introducing slightly more commitment. The progression feels natural because each request logically follows from what they've already agreed to. They're not being pushed up the staircase, they're choosing to climb it because each step makes sense given where they are. The key is making each step reversible and low threat. We can stop at any time if this isn't adding value. This is just to explore whether it makes sense to explore further. No commitment beyond seeing if there's a fit. These phrases preserve autonomy while creating forward momentum. The power of public accountability. Private commitments are easily abandoned. Public commitments create social pressure that makes follow-through more likely. This doesn't mean announcing decisions to the entire company. It means creating witnesses to the commitment who will notice if it's not honored. The simplest approach is summarizing agreements aloud before ending any meeting. So we've agreed that you'll send me your current process documentation by Friday. I'll analyze it over the weekend, and we'll reconvene Monday to discuss recommendations. Does that sound right? This creates public acknowledgement of mutual commitments. Even more powerful is sending written summaries within 30 minutes of any commitment conversation. Thanks for the productive discussion. As we agreed, here are the next steps. This creates a paper trail that makes the commitment feel more official and harder to ignore. The summary should include specific owners, deadlines, and success metrics. Sarah will provide access to the analytics dashboard by Thursday. I'll run the analysis and send preliminary findings by Monday. We'll schedule a follow-up call to review results and determine if a pilot makes sense. This level of specificity makes accountability automatic. Always end summaries with an invitation to correct or modify. Let me know if I missed anything, or if you'd like to adjust any of these next steps. This preserves autonomy while confirming commitment. People rarely make changes to well-crafted summaries, but knowing they could makes them more likely to honor what's written. The identity reinforcement loop. One of the most powerful commitment techniques involves labeling people with positive identities that align with the action you want them to take. When you tell someone they're data-driven or forward-thinking or results-oriented, they feel internal pressure to live up to that label. This works because people want their actions to match their self-concept. If you've established that they're someone who values efficiency, they're more likely to agree to efficiency-improving initiatives. If you've positioned them as someone who makes decisions quickly when the data is clear, they're more likely to move fast when you present clear data. The key is making these labels accurate and earned rather than manipulative flattery. Base them on evidence from your conversations. Given how quickly you implemented the last process improvement, I can tell you're someone who acts fast when you see clear ROI. This feels like recognition rather than manipulation. Use these identity labels strategically throughout your commitment sequence. As someone who values data-driven decisions, you'll probably want to see the pilot results before committing to a full rollout. This makes the suggested action feel consistent with their established identity rather than like a vendor request. The reversibility safety net. Fear kills commitment faster than any other emotion. When people feel trapped or pressured, they default to delay and avoidance. The antidote is building reversibility into every commitment, especially early ones. "We can stop at any time if this isn't working" is one of the most powerful phrases in persuasion because it removes the fear of being stuck with a bad decision. It transforms a potentially permanent commitment into a temporary experiment that can be adjusted or abandoned based on results. This reversibility should be genuine, not just lip service. Build actual off-ramps into your proposals. Trial periods with easy cancellation, pilot projects with clear success metrics, phased implementations that can be paused at any stage. The easier it is to say no later, the easier it is to say yes now. Paradoxically, making commitments more reversible often makes them more permanent. When people don't feel trapped, they're more likely to give initiatives a fair chance. When they see that you're confident enough in your solution to offer easy exits, they're more likely to trust that you'll deliver value. When commitment building backfires, 3 common mistakes kill commitment momentum. First, perceived quid pro quo, making your value delivery feel like a transaction rather than a gift. This happens when you immediately follow value with an ask, or when your gift feels promotional rather than helpful. The fix is genuine generosity with clear intent. Here's something that should help with your current challenge. Use it regardless of whether we end up working together. This positions you as a helpful expert rather than a calculating vendor. Second, momentum stalls when steps feel too big or unclear. If someone agrees to explore options, but you respond by asking for a 3-hour stakeholder meeting, you've broken the progression. The fix is shrinking next steps to feel manageable. Worth a 10-minute conversation to see if this makes sense to explore further. Third, commitment fatigue sets in when you ask for too many decisions too quickly. People have limited decision-making energy, and overwhelming them with choices creates avoidance. The fix is one decision per interaction, with clear progress markers that show forward movement. The compound effect of commitment mastery. Get commitment building right, and you'll see immediate improvements in meeting-to-meeting conversion rates. Fewer prospects will ghost you between conversations. More next steps will actually happen on schedule. Clear ownership will eliminate the confusion that kills deal momentum. At the excellent level, you'll see significant lifts in proposal acceptance rates because decisions will be made during calls rather than in post-meeting deliberations. Less discounting pressure because value has been established through the commitment sequence. Faster legal and procurement processes because stakeholders are already invested in moving forward. At the best level, you'll see multi-phase initiatives approved with public commitments across teams. Champions will advocate for your solution without your direct involvement. Renewals will be pre-agreed months in advance because the relationship has become strategic rather than transactional. This isn't about manipulation or high-pressure sales tactics. It's about creating psychological conditions where good decisions feel easy and natural. You're helping people overcome the inertia that keeps them stuck in suboptimal situations. Master the art of sticky commitments, and you'll never again watch interested prospects disappear into evaluation paralysis. You'll create momentum that carries deals forward even when enthusiasm fades. You'll turn conversations into commitments, and commitments into lasting partnerships. But even the strongest commitments can be undermined by poor message delivery. The next chapter reveals how to craft words that don't just inform, but transform, turning abstract concepts into visceral understanding that drives immediate action. Chapter 7, Message Alchemy. Two presenters deliver identical proposals to identical audiences. Same data, same solution, same potential outcomes. The first speaks for 30 minutes and gets polite nods, followed by "we'll get back to you." The second speaks for 15 minutes and gets immediate questions about implementation timelines. What made the difference? Not the content, the craft. The first presenter shared information. The second created transformation. One dumped facts, the other wove meaning. One spoke to minds, the other moved hearts and minds together. This is message alchemy, the art of turning raw insights into words that don't just inform, but ignite. It's the difference between being heard and being remembered, between generating interest and inspiring action. Master this craft, and your ideas won't just compete for attention, they'll capture imagination. Most people think good content automatically creates good outcomes. They're wrong. Brilliant insights delivered poorly disappear without trace. Average insights delivered masterfully become company legend. The message isn't separate from the meaning. The message is the meaning. The emotional ignition system. Logic doesn't drive decisions. Emotion does. Logic justifies decisions that emotion has already made. This isn't a flaw in human reasoning. It's how our brains are designed to work. Emotion provides the energy that moves us from thinking to acting. Logic provides the pathway that channels that energy toward specific choices. This means your message needs to do two things simultaneously: create emotional resonance and provide logical structure. The emotion gets people leaning forward. The logic gives them permission to say yes. Remove either element and your message falls flat. Consider the difference between "our platform reduces processing time by 40%" and "your team spends 3 hours every day on tasks that could be automated, leaving them frustrated and behind on strategic work. Our platform gives them those 3 hours back." Same fact, different feeling. The first version informs. The second transforms abstract efficiency into human relief. The most powerful emotions in business contexts aren't dramatic. They're subtle but persistent. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're making smart choices. the relief of eliminating daily frustrations, the pride of being ahead of the curve, the security of reducing risk. These emotions don't overwhelm, they motivate. Stories are your primary tool for emotional engagement because they bypass analytical defenses and create what researchers call narrative transportation, the experience of being absorbed into a story world where counter-arguments feel irrelevant. When people are transported, they stop evaluating your claims and start experiencing your vision. The architecture of memorable messages. Every powerful message needs a structural backbone, a single sentence that captures the entire value proposition in terms your audience can instantly understand and easily repeat. This isn't your elevator pitch or your company tagline. It's your narrative spine, the core story that everything else hangs on. The spine follows a simple pattern. We help hero overcome obstacle by bridge to achieve outcome. The hero is your audience, not you. The obstacle is their specific challenge. The bridge is your unique approach. The outcome is their desired future state. We help growing SaaS companies overcome unpredictable customer churn by implementing predictive retention systems to achieve 90% customer lifetime value predictability. That's a spine. It's specific, complete, and memorable. More importantly, it positions your audience as the protagonist of their own success story. The spine needs one verb of change, the action that transforms their current state into their desired state. Implement, eliminate, optimize, accelerate. Choose the verb that best captures the transformation you enable. This verb becomes the through line that connects every element of your presentation. It also needs one metric of success, the number that proves the transformation worked. Not 17 different improvements, but one decisive measure that matters most to your specific audience. This metric becomes your anchor point that everything else supports. Once you have your spine, every slide, every section, every story should reinforce this central narrative. If something doesn't connect to the spine, cut it. Clarity beats comprehensiveness every time. The language of assumed progress. One of the most powerful linguistic tools involves embedding presuppositions, assumptions about future action, into your language. Instead of saying, if we work together, say when we start implementation. Instead of, if you decide to proceed, say as you roll this out to your team. These subtle shifts change how people process your message. If language keeps them in evaluation mode, weighing pros and cons. When language moves them into planning mode, thinking about execution details. The presupposition doesn't force a decision. It makes the positive decision feel more natural and inevitable. But presuppositions must be ethical and reversible. Always provide clear opt-out language that preserves autonomy. When we start next week, assuming this makes sense after you review the proposal. The presupposition creates forward momentum, while the qualifier maintains trust. Pair presuppositions with identity labels your audience embraces. As a data-driven leader, you'll want to see results within the first month. This combines assumed progress with identity reinforcement, making the suggested action feel consistent with how they see themselves. The key is subtlety. Heavy-handed presuppositions trigger reactance, the psychological resistance that emerges when people feel their freedom is being restricted. Light presuppositions feel helpful rather than manipulative because they're making explicit what's already implied by the conversation. The fluency factor. Your brain uses processing ease as a shortcut for truth evaluation. Messages that are easy to read, hear, and understand feel more credible than messages that require effort to decode. This isn't conscious reasoning. It's automatic cognitive processing that happens below the level of awareness. This creates enormous opportunities for ethical persuaders. By making your message more fluent, easier to process, you make it more persuasive without changing the underlying content. Simple language beats complex language. Short sentences beat long sentences. Familiar metaphors beat abstract concepts. Aim for 8th grade readability even when speaking to PhD audiences. This isn't about dumbing down your content, it's about removing friction from comprehension. Your goal is making your insights accessible, not impressive. Complexity doesn't signal expertise, clarity does. Visual fluency matters as much as verbal fluency. One idea per slide beats cluttered layouts. White space beats decoration. Clean fonts beat fancy ones. Your slides should support your message, not compete with it for attention. The rule of 3 provides natural rhythm that makes messages more memorable. Faster, cheaper, better. People, process, technology. Assess, implement, optimize. 3 elements feel complete without being overwhelming. 2 feels incomplete. 4 feels like a list. The metaphor bridge. Abstract concepts become concrete through metaphors that connect new ideas to familiar experiences. The right metaphor doesn't just explain, it illuminates. It makes complex concepts feel simple and foreign solutions feel familiar. The best business metaphors come from your audience's domain, not yours. If you're selling to manufacturers, use manufacturing metaphors. If you're presenting to financial services, use financial metaphors. The metaphor should feel like their language, not your language. Same but better metaphors work particularly well because they combine familiarity with novelty. It's like your current CRM, but with predictive intelligence built in. Think of it as your existing process, but with automated quality checks at every step. The familiar element reduces resistance. The improvement element creates desire. Test your metaphors on someone unfamiliar with your solution. If they can't explain your concept back to you using the metaphor, it's not working. Good metaphors make complex ideas feel obvious. Great metaphors make people wonder why everyone isn't already doing this. Avoid technical metaphors when speaking to business audiences and business metaphors when speaking to technical audiences. The metaphor should bridge from their world to your solution, not from your world to their problem. The delivery dimension. Your message isn't just words, it's words plus voice plus body language plus timing. These elements work together to create meaning that transcends the literal content. Delivery isn't decoration, it's an integral part of the message itself. Pace matters more than most people realize. Speaking 10 to 15% slower than normal conversation feels authoritative rather than rushed. It gives your audience time to process complex ideas and signals that what you're saying is important enough to deserve careful consideration. Pauses create emphasis better than volume or inflection. One beat of silence after a key point gives it time to land. Pauses also create space for your audience to mentally catch up, especially when you're introducing new concepts or challenging existing assumptions. Your physical presence should match your message energy. Stand still during critical asks. Movement can feel like nervousness or uncertainty. Use gestures to illustrate concepts, not to fill nervous energy. Make eye contact during key points to create connection and gauge comprehension. The goal isn't theatrical performance. It's authentic alignment between your content and your delivery. When your words, voice, and body language all support the same message, you create what researchers call nonverbal synchrony, a state where your entire presence reinforces your verbal content. When message alchemy fails, 3 common mistakes kill message effectiveness. First, jargon fog, using industry language that feels exclusive rather than inclusive. This happens when you forget that your audience doesn't live in your technical world. The fix is ruthless translation. Replace every acronym with an analogy, every technical term with a familiar comparison. Second, overnudging with presuppositions that feel manipulative rather than helpful. This triggers reactance and destroys trust. The solution is adding explicit alternative paths and inviting edits to your suggested next steps. Preserve autonomy while creating momentum. Third, monotone delivery that flattens emotional impact. This happens when you focus so much on content that you forget about connection. The fix is practicing with intentional pace variation and marking specific lines for emphasis. Your delivery should serve your message, not distract from it. The compound effect of message mastery. Get message alchemy right, and people will start quoting your key phrases in their own presentations. Your spine becomes their shorthand for discussing the initiative. Your metaphors show up in their internal communications. Your language becomes the vocabulary they use to think about the problem and solution. At the excellent level, stakeholders will retell your story as their own, spreading your message through their organization without your direct involvement. Buying committees will align faster because everyone is using the same framework to evaluate options. Your "when we" language will be adopted as planning language rather than sales language. At the best level, your message becomes the internal narrative that drives organizational change. Teams adopt your success metric as their North Star. Leaders cite your key line in all-hands meetings. Competitors start responding to your framing rather than setting their own. This isn't about manipulation or linguistic tricks. It's about clarity, connection, and memorability. You're helping people understand complex ideas quickly and remember important concepts easily. You're making your insights sticky so they survive the attention chaos of modern business. Master message alchemy, and your words will do more than inform, they'll transform. Your presentations will create believers, not just buyers. Your proposals will generate momentum, not just consideration. But even the most compelling message can be undermined by poor choice architecture. The next chapter reveals how to design decisions that feel inevitable, making the right choice not just logical, but effortless. Chapter 8, Choice Design. The proposal lands on the executive's desk with 17 different configuration options, 4 pricing tiers, 6 add-on modules, and 3 implementation timelines. 2 weeks later, you get the email. We've decided to postpone this initiative until next quarter. Sound familiar? You've just witnessed choice paralysis in action. Your comprehensive proposal, designed to show flexibility and accommodate every possible need, actually made the decision impossible. When faced with too many options, the human brain defaults to the safest choice, no choice at all. This is the hidden challenge that kills more deals than bad products or high prices: decision complexity. While you're busy creating options to serve every scenario, your prospects are drowning in analysis paralysis. They want to make the right choice, but you've made choosing feel overwhelming and risky. The solution isn't fewer options, it's better choice architecture. The way you present options matters more than the options themselves. Master this design principle, and you'll transform decision-making from a burden into a relief. The paradox of choice overload. Human beings think they want unlimited options, but research reveals the opposite. When faced with too many choices, decision quality decreases, satisfaction drops, and regret increases. This isn't because people are lazy. It's because our cognitive systems aren't designed to evaluate infinite possibilities efficiently. The famous jam study illustrates this perfectly. When researchers offered shoppers 24 varieties of jam to sample, 60% stopped to try them. When they offered only 6 varieties, just 40% stopped. But here's the twist. Of those who stopped at the large display, only 3% actually bought jam. Of those who stopped at the small display, 30% made a purchase. More options attracted attention but killed action. This pattern repeats across every business context. Software vendors who offer 12 pricing tiers see lower conversion rates than those who offer 3. Consultants who present 5 different engagement models get fewer decisions than those who present 2. The abundance of choice that feels generous to the seller feels overwhelming to the buyer. The problem isn't just the number of options, it's the cognitive load required to evaluate them. Each additional choice forces prospects to consider more variables, weigh more trade-offs, and imagine more potential regrets. Decision-making becomes work instead of relief. Your prospects aren't looking for the perfect option, they're looking for a good option they can choose confidently. The difference is crucial. Perfect requires exhaustive analysis. Good requires clear criteria and obvious differentiation. The architecture of effortless decisions. Effective choice design follows a simple principle. Make the right decision the easy decision. This doesn't mean limiting options arbitrarily. It means structuring options so the best choice feels obvious rather than overwhelming. The most powerful structure is the 3-tier system. Good, better, best. Not because 3 is a magic number, but because 3 options create natural comparison points without cognitive overload. 2 options feel limiting. 4 options feel complicated. 3 options feel complete. Each tier needs a clear identity and distinct value proposition. The good tier provides essential outcomes at an accessible price point. The better tier adds key capabilities that most customers want. The best tier removes constraints and maximizes outcomes for those who need premium performance. The magic happens in the positioning. The good tier establishes that your solution works and creates a price anchor. The best tier shows what's possible and makes the better tier feel reasonable by comparison. The better tier becomes the natural choice, not too basic, not too complex, just right. This isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. When options have distinct identities and clear trade-offs, people can make confident decisions quickly. When options blur together or hide their differences, people postpone to avoid making mistakes. The default advantage. One of the most powerful tools in choice architecture is the default selection, the option that's pre-selected when people first encounter your proposal. Defaults work because they reduce decision effort and provide implicit recommendations about what most people choose. Research shows that default options get selected 85 to 95% of the time, even when switching is easy and free. This isn't because people are passive. It's because defaults signal what the provider recommends based on experience with similar customers. The key is choosing defaults based on actual success patterns, not revenue optimization. Select the tier that produces the best outcomes for the most customers in situations similar to your prospects. Then explain your reasoning. We recommend the better tier because 80% of companies your size see the best ROI at this level. This transparency builds trust while guiding choice. You're not hiding your recommendation, you're sharing your expertise about what works. The prospect can always choose differently, but they have a starting point based on relevant experience. Make changing the default easy, but intentional. One click or one sentence should be enough to select a different option, but requiring that small action creates a moment of reflection. Am I sure I want something different from what they recommend? The strategic use of decoys. A decoy option is one that's clearly inferior to your target choice, but helps clarify the value of upgrading. When done ethically, decoys don't manipulate, they educate. They make the benefits of your preferred option more visible by providing an obvious point of comparison. Consider a software company offering 3 tiers. Basic at $99 month with limited features, Professional at $199 month with full features plus support, and Enterprise at $299 month with everything plus customization. The basic tier serves as a decoy that makes Professional look like a bargain. You get dramatically more value for just $100 more. The decoy must be genuinely viable for some segment of customers. If nobody would ever rationally choose the basic tier, it's manipulative rather than helpful. But if it serves price-sensitive customers who truly need only basic functionality, it's a legitimate option that also happens to make the Professional tier more attractive. Decoys work because they provide context for value evaluation. Without the basic tier, prospects might anchor on the $199 price and wonder if it's worth it. With the basic tier, they anchor on the dramatic difference in value between $99 and $199 worth of features. The key is transparency about trade-offs. Don't hide what the decoy lacks. Highlight it. The basic tier is perfect if you only need core functionality and don't require support or advanced features. Most growing companies prefer Professional because the power of apples-to-apples comparison. One of the biggest sources of decision paralysis is comparing options that use different metrics, timeframes, or success measures. When prospects can't easily compare alternatives, they default to postponing the decision until they can do more research. Effective choice design uses consistent units across all options. If you're measuring ROI, show ROI for every tier. If you're highlighting time savings, quantify time savings for each option. If you're emphasizing risk reduction, show risk metrics across the board. Convert abstract benefits into concrete comparisons your audience can easily evaluate. Instead of improved efficiency versus optimized performance, show saves 5 hours per week versus saves 12 hours per week. The specific numbers make trade-offs tangible rather than theoretical. Visual comparison tables work better than narrative descriptions because they allow side-by-side evaluation. Use check marks for included features, X marks for excluded features, and upgrade arrows for enhanced capabilities. The pattern should be immediately obvious. Each tier builds logically on the previous one. Time horizons matter too. Don't compare monthly costs for one option with annual savings for another. Use the same measurement period throughout so prospects can make direct comparisons without mental math. The friction strategy. Strategic friction, making some choices slightly harder than others, can guide selection without removing autonomy. The goal isn't to manipulate, but to align effort with thoughtfulness. Easy choices should be good choices. Complex choices should require justification. Make your recommended option the path of least resistance. Pre-select it, provide clear next steps, and remove unnecessary approval layers. Make alternative options require slightly more effort, not to discourage them, but to ensure people choose them intentionally. For example, selecting the recommended tier might require just clicking Get Started. Selecting a different tier might require a brief conversation to ensure it's the right fit. This small friction serves both parties. You avoid mismatched expectations, and they avoid buyer's remorse. Custom solutions should require the most friction because they're the most complex to deliver and the most likely to create problems if poorly scoped. Requiring a discovery call before quoting custom work protects everyone involved. The friction should feel helpful rather than obstructive. Let's make sure this tier fits your needs, feels like service. You must complete this form to proceed, feels like bureaucracy. When choice design backfires. 3 common mistakes kill effective choice architecture. First, analysis paralysis from too many options or unclear differentiation. The fix is ruthless simplification. 3 tiers maximum, clear names, obvious trade-offs. If you can't explain the difference between options in one sentence each, you have too many options. Second, default mistrust when your recommendation feels self-serving rather than customer-serving. The solution is evidence-based defaults with transparent reasoning. Show the data that supports your recommendation and acknowledge when other options might be better for specific situations. Third, dishonest decoys that exist only to make other options look good. This destroys trust and creates buyer's remorse when customers realize they've been manipulated. Every tier must serve real customer needs, even if some serve those needs better than others. The compound effect of choice mastery. Get choice design right, and you'll see immediate reductions in decision delays and scope confusion. Fewer back-and-forth emails about pricing. Clearer internal approvals because stakeholders understand exactly what they're buying. Less post-purchase regret because expectations were set clearly up front. At the excellent level, you'll see significant lifts in target tier selection as your architecture guides prospects toward the option that serves them best. The middle tier becomes the natural choice for most customers. Onboarding becomes faster because scope is clear from the start. At the best level, your choice structure becomes the category standard. Competitors start mirroring your tier names and structure. Partners reference your framework when discussing similar solutions. Market expectations align to your way of thinking about the problem and solution space. This isn't about forcing decisions, it's about facilitating them. You're helping people navigate complexity by providing clear structure and expert guidance. You're turning the burden of choice into the relief of clarity. Master choice design, and you'll never again watch prospects disappear into evaluation paralysis. Your proposals will feel like helpful guides rather than overwhelming catalogs. Your options will clarify rather than confuse. But even the most elegant choice architecture means nothing if you can't sustain the influence you've built. The final chapter reveals how to transform these tactical skills into a systematic approach that compounds your persuasive power over time, turning occasional wins into predictable outcomes. Chapter 9, Lasting Mastery. You now hold the complete system. 7 interconnected skills that transform how people respond to your ideas. But knowledge without application is just expensive entertainment. The difference between reading about persuasion and mastering persuasion lies in what you do in the next 7 days. This isn't about perfecting every technique before you start. It's about installing a simple loop that turns these skills into second nature. Because here's what separates occasional wins from predictable influence. Systems beat heroics every time. The most successful persuaders don't rely on inspiration or perfect conditions. They follow repeatable processes that work regardless of mood, energy, or circumstances. They've converted tactical skills into strategic habits that compound over time with less effort, not more. The 7-step influence loop. Every persuasive interaction, whether it's a sales call, team meeting, or partnership negotiation, follows the same fundamental sequence. Master this loop, and you'll never again wonder what to say or when to say it. Start with route control. Spend 60 seconds diagnosing whether your audience wants quick cues or detailed analysis. Ask one qualifying question. What would help you decide today? Their response tells you everything you need to know about how to structure your message. Match your depth to their stakes and preempt common objections with light inoculation. Move to attention priming. Before you share any content, make your key ideas salient. Lead with stakes that matter to them specifically, not generic importance. Use identity primes that activate their professional values as operators who optimize cash flow. Sequence everything as stakes, proof, path, ask. Open loops early and close them strategically. Apply power framing. Choose gain or loss frames based on their current mindset. Set anchors using status quo costs or premium benchmarks. Show clear contrasts between old way and new way using one decisive metric. Pair any risk with specific efficacy steps. Keep scarcity real and respectful. State genuine constraints, not manufactured urgency. Add social gravity. Build proof stacks with one hard number, one recognizable name, and one 4-sentence story. Place this proof near your ask, not buried in background slides. Signal prestige through generous teaching rather than aggressive credentials. Make agreement feel normal and safe, not risky or rebellious. Create sticky commitments. Give value first, then ask for small commitments that build toward bigger ones. Design a staircase. 5-minute review leads to 15-minute scoping, leads to 30-minute decision. Summarize agreements publicly to lock in consistency. Make early steps reversible and late steps decisive. Craft memorable messages. Build everything around a 1-sentence spine. We help hero overcome obstacle by bridge to achieve outcome. Embed ethical presuppositions that assume progress while preserving autonomy. Use 8th grade readability and the rule of 3. Match your delivery pace to message importance. Design effortless choices. Limit options to 3 tiers with clear identities. Set evidence-based defaults with transparent reasoning. Use ethical decoys that illuminate value rather than manipulate selection. Make apples-to-apples comparisons with consistent metrics and timeframes. The loop works because each step builds on the previous one while setting up the next. Route control ensures your message gets processed correctly. Priming makes your content feel immediately relevant. Framing gives facts meaning. Social proof reduces perceived risk. Commitments create momentum. Messages stick in memory. Choices feel obvious. The transformation you've already begun. You're no longer the person who started reading this book. You now see persuasion as design, not debate. You understand that attention precedes meaning, meaning precedes commitment, and commitment precedes choice. You recognize that people don't buy products, they buy meanings, stories, and identities. This shift changes everything. Instead of pleading for attention, you engineer it. Instead of hoping for the best, you design outcomes. Instead of talking longer when people resist, you change frames, routes, or proof points. Your words become levers that move situations rather than noise that fills silence. You can now create momentum on demand. One priming question can flip a room from skeptical to curious. One well-chosen frame can transform a cost center into a profit opportunity. One micro-commitment can move a stalled deal toward closure. These aren't lucky breaks, they're predictable results of systematic application. Most importantly, you can scale influence without burning out. Instead of reinventing your approach for every situation, you adapt proven frameworks to new contexts. Your stories become reusable assets. Your proof stacks travel across conversations. Your choice architectures work for multiple offerings. Efficiency replaces effort. The relationship revolution. These skills don't just win deals, they transform relationships. When you use someone's own frames and values to structure conversations, they feel understood rather than sold to. When you preserve autonomy and invite edits to your proposals, they feel respected rather than pressured. When you celebrate small wins publicly, they feel valued rather than used. Trust compounds through consistency. You keep promises in writing, acknowledge trade-offs honestly, and give value before asking for anything in return. People start seeking your input because conversations with you feel productive rather than transactional. You become a trusted advisor rather than a persistent vendor. This approach works because it aligns with how people actually want to be influenced. Nobody enjoys feeling manipulated, but everyone appreciates feeling understood. Nobody likes being pressured, but everyone values being helped to make good decisions quickly and confidently. The relationships you build through ethical persuasion become self-reinforcing. Satisfied customers become vocal advocates. Successful partnerships lead to new opportunities. Team members who feel heard and valued deliver discretionary effort. Your reputation for clarity and integrity attracts the kinds of people and projects you want to work with. Your new capabilities. You can now accomplish things that seemed impossible before you understood these principles. You can win approvals in single meetings without discounting because you've primed attention, framed value, provided social proof, secured micro-commitments, and designed obvious choices. The decision feels inevitable rather than risky. You can align skeptical stakeholders quickly by tuning your message to their specific identities and values. Technical audiences get evidence-heavy central route processing. Executive audiences get credibility-focused peripheral route processing. Financial audiences get loss-framed cost justifications. Innovation audiences get gain-framed opportunity positioning. You can turn lukewarm interest into signed agreements through reversible pilots that reduce fear, transparent trade-offs that build trust, and public commitments that create accountability. People move from maybe someday to let's start Monday because the path feels clear and safe. These aren't theoretical possibilities, they're practical capabilities you can deploy immediately. The frameworks are simple enough to remember under pressure, but sophisticated enough to handle complex situations. They work in conference rooms and coffee shops, on video calls and in email threads, with individual decision makers and buying committees. The compound effect of systematic practice. Here's where mastery gets really powerful. The more you use these skills, the easier they become. Fluency compounds while friction falls away. Your frames become the default way people in your industry think about problems. Your phrasing becomes team shorthand for discussing initiatives. Your proof points become category lore that everyone references. Habits beat heroics because they remove decision fatigue from your influence attempts. You don't have to remember 17 different techniques. You follow one 7-step loop that adapts to any situation. You don't have to craft perfect messages from scratch. You modify proven templates that already work. Weekly reviews of your frames and asks keep your approach current and effective. Quarterly refreshes of your proof stacks ensure your examples stay relevant and compelling. Annual updates of your choice, architectures, reflect lessons learned and market evolution. The system improves itself through structured reflection and iteration. This creates freedom rather than rigidity. Faster cycles mean fewer meetings to reach the same outcomes. More leverage per message means greater impact with calmer effort. Predictable processes mean you can delegate persuasive tasks to team members who follow the same frameworks. Your first implementation. Don't wait for perfect conditions or complete confidence. Pick one live conversation happening this week and apply the loop. Start simple. Diagnose the route in 60 seconds. Prime with one question. Frame with one before-after metric. Add one proof stack near your ask. Request one micro commitment. Present 3 clear choices with a recommended default. The conversation doesn't have to be high stakes. Practice on internal meetings, vendor discussions, or team planning sessions. The goal is building fluency with the sequence, not achieving perfect execution. Every application teaches you something about timing, phrasing, or audience response. Capture learnings immediately in a 2-minute postmortem. What worked better than expected? What felt awkward or forced? What would you change next time? What elements could become templates for future use? These quick reflections accelerate your learning curve and build your personal playbook. Start with one step rather than all 7. Maybe you focus only on priming for the first week, then add framing the second week, then social proof the third week. Gradual implementation feels manageable and allows you to notice the specific impact of each element. The moment of truth. You stand at a choice point. You can close this book, feel good about the insights you've gained, and gradually forget most of what you've learned. Or you can take the first step towards systematic influence mastery right now, today, before other priorities crowd out your intention. One question can flip a room from resistant to receptive. One frame can transform a cost discussion into a value conversation. One choice design can eliminate the analysis paralysis that kills deals. These aren't exaggerations, they're documented effects of applying decision science to business communication. You have the sequence, you have the words, you have the steps. You don't need more information, you need more application. You don't need perfect conditions, you need deliberate practice. You don't need natural charisma, you need systematic skill. The people who master these principles don't just win more deals or lead more effectively. They become the calm persuaders who move people and markets. They're the ones others turn to when important decisions need to be made. They're the ones who shape industry conversations rather than just participating in them. This is your invitation to join their ranks, not through manipulation or pressure, but through clarity, service, and systematic excellence. Not by talking louder or longer, but by designing outcomes and engineering consent. The world needs more ethical persuaders, people who use these skills to create value rather than extract it, to solve problems rather than create them, to build trust rather than exploit it. People who understand that true influence comes from serving others' interests while advancing their own. Start today. Start now. Start with the next conversation you have. Apply one element of the loop and notice what changes. Then apply another element tomorrow and another the day after that. Your future self, the one who wins approvals effortlessly, aligns teams quickly, and builds lasting partnerships, is waiting for you to take the first step. The only question is, will you take it? The science of persuasion isn't just about influencing others. It's about becoming the kind of person others want to be influenced by. Someone who brings clarity to confusion, momentum to stagnation, and confidence to uncertainty. That person is you. That time is now. That first conversation is today. Begin.